As Dave Caldwell calls you, the second most attractive man ever to play for Chesterfield.
Well, he would have to say that, wouldn't he?
Legends of the
Hi everyone, Dave here. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Legends of the Spire. I am, as always, sat on my old Saltergate seat in the garden to introduce the podcast. And I think this is number 62, I think, of the former players and managers that I've spoken to. And this week, to celebrate that, we have a top 10 appearance maker on the podcast as I spoke to Andy Kowalski. Now, Andy was at Chesterfield throughout the whole of the 1970s and for a good chunk of the 1980s too, so lots and lots to talk about. He played under, half a dozen different managers alongside loads of different legendary players and made hundreds and hundreds of appearances. So I tried to kind of briefly touch on most of that in the hour that I had to chat with him. It's also the 50th anniversary of him first joining Chesterfield in December this year, so I felt like a really good opportunity to talk to him as well. And it just feels at the moment, with Mike Jones playing that pivotal role in the Chesterfield midfield, that it's great to have a kind of holding midfielder on there, the position that holds the team together. And we've had a good fair few of them over the years, of which Andy Kowalski is right up there at the top. As always, I am at Spire Legends on Twitter, if it's around for much longer, and Instagram, and Legends of the Spire on Facebook. So it'd be great to hear from you. And if you can like, share, comment, retweet, subscribe, whatever it is you can do on whatever platform you're listening or watching on, that would really help to spread the word of all those players that I've spoken to over the last, 2 years that I've been doing this podcast. So here we are with this week's episode of Legends of the Spire, and it's a proper top 10 legend as I spoke to Andy Kowalski.
Legends of the
Take us back right to the start then, when you first started kicking a ball. So where did you kind of grow up and supporting and idolising and all that stuff?
Yeah, well, I suppose some of it is told to you because you can't remember some of it when you're sort of younger than 4 years old, apparently. And my mum and dad, my father came over from Poland after the war, Second World War. And so it was a tough time. You know, my mum had already got a little girl with my father, and then I came along. And then there were four more after me. So I think they were in sort of lodgings with another old guy who bought me my first football when I was about 3 years old, just kicking it around in the backyard, you know. So, and that was in a little mining village called Langworth, where there's a fella called Ken Wagstaff who was a hero at Mansfield and also a hero at Hull City. Lived, you know, he was from Langworth as well, you know. So I think sport was one of the biggest things for a release for a lot of the workers in those days in the 50s when I grew up. And, you know, everybody had a football or hoped they'd get a football of some sort. And that's what men did. They played football at the weekend and cricket in the summer, I suppose. And that was their social life. And the rest of the time they were in the working men's club, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah. So who did you get to go and kind of watch football when you were
Yeah,
younger?
my father used to take me to watch Mansfield Town, dare I say, on a Chesterfield podcast. But yes, he would take me to Mansfield on a Saturday. I'd go down on the barrier, and he'd be somewhere at the back, you know, probably in the bar, and I'd find him after the game, you know, mingling through people's legs and trying to find him, you know. So that was in the 60s, which you know, you meet up with some of the players that you watched as a sort of 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old boy who were playing at that time in the 60s through either work or social or whatever. And it's great just to get together with those people at that time who were your boyhood heroes at that time. Mansfield Town, where they beat West Ham in the FA Cup. I was there, you know, on the night, and it was Bobby Moore was playing for sort of West Ham. They just played in the World Cup and everything. So it was, you know, an immense victory, and it just makes you want to be a footballer, basically.
Yeah.
That's all I ever wanted to be, a footballer, you know.
And it was a great time, obviously, to be to be watching football, wasn't it? Going into a World Cup
Oh yeah,
kind
well,
of year. It's
yeah, it was
nice memories.
amazing. I mean, as a 13-year-old, when England won the World Cup, um, everybody was talking about Pele being one of the youngest players at 16, 17 to play in the World Cup. And I thought, well, I'm 13. In 4 years' time, I could play in the World Cup for England.
Mm.
That was the mindset that you had as a young kid. It never happened, but that was how you thought. You were just obsessed with the game. Bobby Charlton, all the players, it was amazing.
Yeah, and you actually played for the England boys clubs side,
Yeah,
is that right? What was that all?
yeah,
Explain to me what that was about.
yeah. That was. I played my youth football at Welbeck Colliery Youth Club, and we had a good side in the day. And then there was the Nottingham Association of Boys Clubs, and then from there was the England Association of Boys Clubs. So I managed to get into the England side. We had a tour of Germany. Well, when I say a tour, we stayed in a place called Lübecker in Germany and played, several representative games. We played against Ireland National Association of Boys Clubs and Scotland National Association of Boys Clubs. So, we probably only had a handful of games, but to get there and you got your cap and everything. So that's when I started to develop more as a player. When I was sort of 17, 18, I was one of those lads that I was very skillful, though I say it myself, up to being sort of 14, 15, and then my body stopped developing, if you like, and you got bigger lads playing against you, knocking you off the ball, and I didn't, I lost a couple of years physically, and then I started to come back with sort of 17, 18. And that's when, coming out of the youth league at 18, I went to sign at a club called Alfreton Town, which were in the old Midland League.
Mm-hmm.
And a gentleman there called Alf England saw some potential in me because he signed me for Alfreton Town, and we had a pre-season friendly with Chesterfield, and obviously they saw something in me. And the next thing, I was going to train at Pitt Street at Eckington with Chesterfield, sort of amateurs, if you like, the lads that were hoping to get in through the back door, if you see, because at that time there were apprenticeships when you were sort of 15, 16, which I missed out on, obviously. But, there's always an opening if you're good enough to get back in there.
It's great, isn't it, when people impress on in those pre-season friendlies and things. We've just had it this season with Uche Bulam playing for Matlock one night, and then a few days later is playing and now scoring for Chesterfield. It's amazing,
and that's what I always say to lads that have been with football clubs as youth players and then sort of get, pushed out or, told that they're not good enough or whatever. But if they've got a belief in themselves, they're always back into it, I know it's a little bit different now these days, but there's so many players, I think, develop certain things at different times. It's not just a physical and skill game, it's a mind game as well. And it's those cogs clicking in your head that piece things together on the pitch. It's not just about being able to dribble, and it's seeing the whole game and seeing the picture.
So where were you playing on the pitch then at that time?
I was mainly midfield. I think that goes back to when I was like at school, playing at sort of 7, 8, 9 years old. I sort of played centre half for the school team because I felt that I could see everything in front of me, and I could sort of control things and know where to go. And we were very successful as that sort of youth team, and I think that developed later on. I became just a holding midfield player, supporting the defence and supporting attack. Just seeing things on the pitch. This is I think Frank Barlow, when somebody asked him something about me, and he said Andy was great at occupying space, and what he meant was that when we were attacking and the ball was going to get knocked out, I had an idea where the ball was going to get knocked out too. You know, you get a knowledge of football, and so you could sort of be there and, you know, set the move back up again and get it, keep pressure on and that sort of thing.
Well, and the key players, aren't they? They're not the players that necessarily get the notice they deserve sometimes.
The players that get the adulation, and it will always will be, and always, you know, are your strikers, you know, really your goalkeepers, and you know, the midfield players that get in the box and score goals, Frank Lampard's, and, you know, the ones you look at when Nottingham Forest were very successful. John McGovern, he was in that team, you know, week in, week out, but he didn't get the plaudits that maybe John Robertson was getting, and Gary Birtles, and, you know, these guys up front, you know, but he was there week in, week out doing a great job. And the great thing is that sometimes the watching supporter just follows the ball around the pitch. You know, his eyes are where the ball is. They don't see anything off the ball that's happening, particularly. Some do, don't get me wrong. But a guy called Len Badger that I played with, who joined Chesterfield when Joe Shaw came in, and great guy, Len. And he said to me, he was a lovely guy, great analyst in a way. And he said, Andy, he said, you'll never educate a crowd, you know. And he was right, you know, because they just see the game different to how you see it. But when you get your own players saying, we want you in this side because we know what you do and what you're good at, it speaks volumes for you, you know.
Yeah, and definitely from when I was watching Chesterfield, and kind of Mark Allott was in the Chesterfield midfield for a long time. Didn't always get the plaudits he deserved. He kept things simple, intercepted balls, and we've got it now with Mike Jones as well in midfield. He's kind of come in and started doing that job, hasn't he? Which is important. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it is. Yeah.
So you then joined Chesterfield. So it was under Jimmy McGuigan, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So what was it like, that kind of introduction into the club?
Well, the great thing was getting sort of associated with Chesterfield and playing and training, and it was difficult for me because I had no car. My father had got no car, and I was working in Mansfield, and I used to have to get to Pitt Street at Eckington for training on a Tuesday and Thursday, depending on what games we got. So, you know, I was trying to catch a bus from from Nottingham Road in Mansfield down to the main station in Mansfield, and then getting an express bus to Sheffield and getting off at the bottom of Renishaw. I don't know if you know these areas, David, but and I used to basically run to get up to training in time from the bottom of Renishaw right up to Pitt Street, which is a hell of a way if you've ever walked it or run it. And I get to the dressing room, and the coach at the time, trainer Harold Roberts, he said, "Come on, they're out on the pitch." I said, "What are we doing?" He says, "Oh, we're going to run." Oh, great! I've just done one, you know. So, and then when I got back into Chesterfield after training to get a bus back to Mansfield, by the time I got back to Mansfield, there was no bus back to the village where I lived, Church Warsop. So I would have to thumb it, walk it. What I used to do was go into this little cafe bar that was open, and I used to go in and see if I knew anybody, or just say, "Is anybody going back to Warsop? You know, can you give me a lift?" And, you know, stuff like that. So yeah, Jim McGuigan signed me as pro. I was playing obviously for the reserves and everything, and we had a game. We played against Doncaster, and I knew I'd played really well. I went in after the game, and I know I was playing well at that time. And Harold Roberts, coach, says the manager's in the corridor, wants you to go out and have a chat with him, which, you know, was quite emotional as I speak to you now. I thought, crikey, this could be it, you know. And I went out into the corridor, and he said, in his Scottish accent, and he always reminded me of Sean Connery, because he was of that era. He always immaculately dressed, and He said, "Son, come and see me on Saturday morning about joining the club on professional forms." And that was it. It was amazing. And so on the Saturday for the home game, I went in to see him before the game and had a chat about what he could offer me and all the rest of it, which was way below what I thought footballers got. But I said I'll think about it and everything. And if it had given me the form there and then, I would have signed it. But so it was fantastic. And I'd massive respect for him, massive. And the thing is, when we played in the Northern Intermediate League as like under 19s, which I was 19 then, on match days you could go in the dressing room before the kickoff and see the players getting ready for the game and all the little rituals, and someone would have a chat with you and everything. It was amazing to get into that dressing room, really. And I signed pro in. It's coming up to 50 years in December this year.
Brilliant.
Which doesn't seem 50 years, but hey, God.
Were there any players that kind of took you under their wing a little bit when you kind of first
the players
joined the club? Yeah.
Well, they would come and have a word with you, and I just remember David Pugh coming over to me and sitting with me and having a chat, and he said, "You're a really good footballer." He says, "You are a really good footballer." He says, "But the only trouble here is," he says, "the training, all they do is run you. You never see a ball." And it was true, all they seemed to want to do was run and run and run and run you. It gave you stamina, but you never saw a ball. From Monday, probably Thursday morning, if you were lucky, you saw a ball, which, was strange, really. Having been a kid and all I ever did went on the street and down the general and knocking ball off the wall and back to me and control it and all that, but thankfully it's changed these days. You got on the pitch on a Saturday and sometimes you were fatigued. It shouldn't be like that.
No, should it really? There's a great picture of Jimmy McGuigan on a trampoline. I don't know if you've ever seen it. I think it was a few years before you joined, but he's bouncing up and down on this trampoline with all the players kind of looking around at him. It looks like
I've not seen that, but he was an advocate of yoga. He said it was one of the best things that any athlete could do, and we used to have yoga sessions regular before training, which just stretching and different positions, and it did give your body such great, suppleness and everything. It was really good on that.
Chesterfield opened the scoring with a goal by Colin Tart after 20 minutes. 2 minutes later, Charlton were level with that goal there by Keith Peacock. After 26 minutes, it was Charlton again. The ball coming to Tybman on the right. His cross is touched in by Robinson, 2-1. Then a spectacular free kick by Bobby Flavel lowered the scores at 2-2. Into the second half, and a corner's touched on, and superb finishing there by Flanagan to make it 3-2 to Charlton. On the hour, Colin Tart scored his second goal of the night with a right foot shot there from the edge of the box, 3-3. But Charlton got their noses in front again through Robinson at 4-3. Chesterfield then equalised for the third time in the evening with a header there by Walker. But the final word was with Charlton. There was a little bit of a doubt about whether their fifth goal was offside, but you'll see here as the ball comes forward, the referee on the right-hand side of the picture is well placed, rules no offside. Peacock goes through to score and round off a truly amazing night.
When I broke into the team at the end of that 72-73 season, we'd got a couple of injuries. Albert Holmes had got injured, and I think Kenny Tyler was injured. And basically, I got a call because there was a game that night, and we used to go in and play head tennis before we started training over the railings at is it Compton Street and St Margaret's Drive. There was a railing that divided the two sections, and we used to play head tennis over there. And I was playing head tennis, and Jerry Clark came round and said, "Andy, the gaffer wants a word with you." And he said, "Can you play right back at Scunthorpe tonight?" And I would have played anywhere, basically. And it was amazing.
And we won that game, didn't we?
We won 1-0.
1-0, clean sheet.
Ray McHale scored. We were in a relegation battle, obviously, at that time. And it was, I think Scunthorpe were down there as well. So not the most salubrious place to make your debut, Scunthorpe, at the old showground. But hey, it didn't matter,
Mm. So what was it like playing that first game then?
Well, there was excitement. There was a lad that got into the side as well, Steve Downs, who I'd played in a game with the week before, and I'd played up front with him. And I think he scored 2 or 3 goals, and we beat Hull City reserves. And I'd had a really good game, and he'd had a good game, and it got him back into the first team, Steve. And so he was saying, "Oh, you'll be all right," and this, that, and the other. And saying when he made his debut and all the rest of it, and he says, "You'll be fine. Just listen to the players and just do what you want to do. You know what I mean? Just do what you know." And Jim McGuigan was like that. He just said, "Listen to the players, talk around you, just play your own game." And it was just exciting. I think we went for a steak before the game, and it was a fantastic feeling. Absolutely amazing. A friend of mine, I rang him up at work and said, "Look, I'm making my debut tonight." And he came over to Scunthorpe, and a couple of mates, watched me make my debut, basically.
And you kept your place in the team, didn't you? So you played like the last 10 games that season, didn't you?
I played the last 10 games. I played 5 at fullback and 5 in midfield. And Jim McGuigan was absolutely brilliant with me. He just said, when I played in midfield, he said, "Just play how you see it. Don't worry." He says, "When I make a team talk," he said, "don't you bother listening to it. You just go out and play how you play in midfield. Just do that. That's all I want you to do. Just play how you play." Because at that time, I would get up, get back, see things, whatever. And he didn't want to fill my head up with anything. And the sad thing was that at the end of that season, he went to Rotherham, as you know. And it left me a little bit, not in the lurch, but having like a guy there who believed in me totally, then going. Joe Shaw came in, but he did write me a letter, Jim McGuigan, because I wasn't even on the phone at home. I lived at home. We didn't have a phone. And he wrote me a letter, really nice letter, saying, "I shouldn't really be contacting you, but," he says, "I'm sorry to say that I'm going to Rotherham United. I'm trying to get you over to Rotherham with me." But the club wouldn't hear anything of it, because I was like new kid on the block, if you like. I played 10 games. I was playing really well. We had a player on loan from Sheffield Wednesday, a guy called Jackie Sinclair, and he was at Sheffield Wednesday. And one of the games, I think it was nearly the last game of the season against Bristol Rovers, I think they got promotion. He said, "Derek Dooley is coming today to watch you." Crikey, And that was, it was a shame the season ended when it did, in a way. Yeah. I was on a massive high and in a great place, and then McGuigan went, and it just seemed to change, the dynamics changed for me to some extent.
Yeah, because I suppose it must have felt a bit like going back to having to prove yourself all over again with a different manager, and
it's a different manager. There were people there that knew me, knew I could play and everything, but Joe Shaw wasn't a very strong character, unfortunately. He was a lovely guy, and I don't think lovely guys in management survive, really. Some of the senior players and players he brought in were saying, "I'm not going to play there, I'm playing there." And you ended up being a young guy or new into the game, shove you outside on the wide left, and it just wasn't for me. So my game did falter till later on that season, and I ended up playing up front because a guy called Frank Lodge got injured. We were down at Brighton, and I went up front with Ernie. And it gave me a new lease of life, if you like. It gave me a new dynamic to the game, and I was up front, and I was really enjoying it, So yeah, Jim McGuigan, when we used to play against Rotherham, he always found me out and came and had a word with me, and he used to ring me up actually regularly. He signed Rod Fern. You can probably remember him signing Rod Fern, who was a good friend of mine, Rod. And Rod said to me, he said, Jim's been trying his hardest to get you, and all the rest of it. And he said, but they just won't let you go, no matter what. So, you find these things out and everything. But, don't get me wrong. It sounds like I wasn't happy at Chesterfield. I did love it at Chesterfield, When you think, Joe Shaw went, and then Arthur Cox came in. And Arthur was a breath of fresh air, really, because he was a good coach. He put good sessions on with the ball, and we did some good running, don't get me wrong. But he was very well organised and wouldn't take any crap from players. He got rid of the ones that wanted to, tell people this, that, and the other. And he did turn the club around. It's just unfortunate that he bust the club for money, and
yeah,
it's
I was looking at the kind of stats in terms of games per season and everything like that, and obviously when Shaw did come in, you kind of, I think in that first season you played about 20 odd league games, something like that. But the season after, you played all but one, I think there was only one game where I think it was the 4-4 versus Watford or something. It was the only game you didn't play. So you did become an ever-present key fixture in that team, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Yes, yeah. I mean, it's strange, but I've never been one for stats. And people say, how many games did you play? How many goals did you score? I think later in life you start looking at things like that, and you think, crikey, yeah, I did. And I was an ever-present, really, pretty much under Joe, because I know at one stage I was playing up front with Ernie. Then they pulled me back into midfield, because we were struggling. And I think at that time, one of the greatest games I can remember and enjoyed was we played away at Crystal Palace. And if you remember the winger, Peter Taylor, right winger, played for England, and he ended up at Tottenham as well.
Yeah.
They asked me to do a job on him, sort of left-hand side midfield. And I can remember making 2 goals for Ernie. I scored the last goal myself, and we came out 4-1 winners. And I think Malcolm Allison was manager at Crystal Palace, and he even had a word with him when I came off the pitch. Said how well I'd played and everything. And it's things like that people don't see, and you don't really talk about. But got his fedora on, his cigar, just put his arm around me as we're going up the tour, and said, "Good game, son," and that was it. But yeah.
It kind of makes, you see it quite a bit, don't you, sometimes with people like Paul Cook and people like that, how they kind of they're kind of looking for opposition players sometimes after games, and like you say, just giving them a well done and stuff like that. I suppose it's always kind of keeping it in the mind, isn't it, of a list of players that they might try and find out one day.
Yeah, that's right. And sometimes some managers, I mean, McGuigan didn't sit on the touchline; he always sat in the stand. When I was at Chesterfield, in that era, I think a lot of the managers did sit up in the stands sometimes. Got a better picture of the game, I think.
Yeah. So Arthur Cox came in, so it was the 76-77 season, I think it was. I've spoken to quite a lot of players around that time with Arthur Cox. Some of the players that he brought in and how he kind of had to maybe change his managerial style a bit, maybe because of some of the personalities that he brought into the club. I was kind of interested in what you kind of thought of Arthur Cox. And
well, Arthur was a great coach, but his management probably wasn't his greatest skill. He probably treated everybody pretty much the same. And he brought Jeff Salmons in. I mean, that, people when I was there talk about some of the things that happened when Sammy was there, because Jeff had got a pub at that time. And when Arthur came in, Arthur knew he got a pub, and Jeff had often, when there was we'd had a bad result or whatever, and he came to the dressing room after, reading the riot act or whatever, Jeff would just get up and, I've got a pub to run, I'm going in the bath, and that sort of thing. And there was some he did sign some strong characters, but he did sign some very good players, I mean, when we were going for promotion that season, it worked out bad for me in the fact that he signed Phil Bonnyman and I got left out of the side, and I'll never forget it, because we'd had a really good run right along, and we played away at Oxford, and I knew he'd signed Phil Bonnyman, and I knew he was a midfield player, and I knew he scored goals, but it was a different player to me. I was just a holding midfield. And Coxey said before the game, if everybody's playing for the places, I bought players in, everybody's playing for the place, and it was like, if we win tonight, the team will keep the same, But Bill Green, who was the captain, came over to me and said, just because we've signed Phil Bonnyman, it doesn't mean that you're going to get left out the side. And I turned to Bill and said, why are you telling me that, Bill? And he says, well, he didn't know what to say. And on the Saturday, we played against Blackburn at home. And I got dropped out the side, and Coxey pulled me in on the Friday and pulled me into his office. And he said, I don't know what to say to you. He said, I'll stand up. He says, and I'll let you punch me straight between the eyes. And I said, no. I says, you got your decision to make. You live and die by your decision, And I said, I played in that team and we're a great group. And, it knocked me for 6, I says, I just want them to win tomorrow. And, they were a bit of sour grapes, really. And to this day, I talked to Frank Barlow about it. He said he really didn't know what to do, but he'd spent so much money on Phil Bonnyman. It was never really disclosed how much, but they say that it was the most paid for a player in that transfer window. That and it must have been getting on for 200,000. You know what I mean? And Frank said, "What you got to look at is how much it cost him to replace you." And I said, "Well, yeah, that is a bit of consolation, but but then I was back in the side the following game. I mean, unfortunately, we got beat 1-0 by Blackburn, didn't we? And it was, well, in those days, a 4-pointer, I suppose. And
a few minutes later, Blackburn's Andy Crawford forced him to make another good save. At the other end, Chesterfield had a good chance. But Alan Birch wasn't able to capitalise on it. In the second half, Chesterfield made an aggressive start, but a promising move was thwarted by Blackburn's goalkeeper, Jim Arnold. From the resulting corner, the ball eventually found its way to Phil Walker, but his shot was just wide. But in the end, it was Blackburn who scored. Simon Garner got the goal, and the score stayed Chesterfield 0, Blackburn 1.
It was interesting because it was when I went out, and I kind of yesterday I went out, said, has anyone got any questions you want to ask? And the match that people wanted me to ask you about was the defeat against Blackburn. And obviously it was Bonnyman and Stirk, wasn't it, that came in?
Yeah. Stirk had come in at Oxford. Stirk played at Oxford because he left Colin Tart out. Because me and Colin had similar conversations, call Coxey from, uphill and down dale sort of thing. But that's football, as I say.
Yeah, because obviously we only finished, 2 points behind Blackburn, something like that. But obviously they finished second, didn't they? And we finished fourth.
Yeah. I think because I came back the next game, which was Chester. I think it was Chester. And I got injured. I did my ligaments in my knee in that game. So that was my season done with, more or less, pretty much. But I mean, me and Arthur had a love-hate relationship. You know, he sent me off, I think, in little knockabout games, five-a-sides, when we'd finished training and we played. I think he sent me off twice in little five-a-side games, probably because I'm not passed to him or, you know, taking the mickey or whatever. But, you know, and I think Sean O'Neill once got sent off. He got sent back to the ground for something, but he'd wind players up. We'd have these games when we finished and you'd be going in to win the ball, you know what I mean? Because there was an incident with me and Les Hunter in a game where we just went into a block tackle and Les' knee did all his knee. And it wasn't over the top or nothing. It was just a solid challenge because I wasn't a dirty player, you know, especially in those sort of games as well. All right, you might kick people, you know, in opposition and all this rest of it in that time. But, and you know, I was obviously upset that I'd injured Les, but Coxey just said, get off the pitch, get back to the ground, go, you know, and that was it. And he made a thing of it, you know. And then I went into the physio room when I got back to the ground and Les was on it. I said, Les, are you okay or whatever? He says, yeah, I mean, my knee's bad, Andy, or whatever. And Coxey came in from the other side and said, you know, get out of here and all the rest of it. So, yeah, I had 1 or 2 goes with Coxey. But Coxey liked me in the team. You know, it was only up till we were going for promotion that I think he wanted he needed players, which I quite agreed with. And I knew Phil because I played against Phil loads of times, you know what I mean? And I knew he was a good player, but he was a different player to me, you know. And when you bring a player that's different, who's looking to score goals, it's different to somebody who's holding and breaking up attacks, and you know, it's just a different mindset. You know, you've got more responsibility, I feel. You know, so yeah, I mean, you know, we were great friends, Phil and I. You know what I mean? We had a great crowd of lads. I mean, there's always a few stories you can tell, you know, and I mean, one of the stories about Coxey, I don't know if anybody's told you this story, but we played away at Wimbledon, and we stayed overnight on Friday down near Fulham. And what we used to do, we used to have an evening meal, all the players, management, directors that went, whatever, and they used to take a guy called Reg Whittaker down on the coach from the Sheffield Telegraph, Sheffield Star. And we went down to stay somewhere around Fulham. And we used to have a meal. And then whoever you were rooming with, you used to room in pairs, you know. I think I was with Alan Crawford that particular trip. And we used to have a wander out, have a walk, find a pub, have a couple of halves, not silly drinking, just a couple of beers, help you sleep, you know. There were about probably four groups of 2, you know, did that. Anyway, this particular night, we'd all gone a walk and couldn't find a pub. And we found a pub, and when we walked in, Jeff Salmon was in with the John Ridley. Colin Tart was in with me and Crawford and Colin Tart. There were 5 of us. And so, couldn't find a pub. No, we'll be all right in here. Unbeknown to us, as we've all walked in there, Coxey, and I think it was one of the directors, I forget who it was now, but anyway, he's seen us walk in the pub. So we've ordered drinks. He's come in, just walked up to the bar where we were, looked over between us at the bar, see what we'd ordered, you know, 5 beers or whatever, turned around and gone, not said a thing. So we were youngish pros to some extent. Jeff was like, you know, we're all right, this, that, and the other. Don't worry about it. So we sat down, got this beer down, and come on, we better get going. Jeff said, hang on, lads, we've been caught. We're having another one. So we had another beer and went back to the hotel. And this was only probably 8:30 at night, you know what I mean? 9 o'clock. Went back, went to the room. Frank Barlow came in to me and said, Andy, he wants all 5 of you in your room at 10 o'clock, Coxie, you know. So there were me, Alan Crawford, Colin Tart, John Ridley. Frank says, "Where's Sammy?" I said, "I don't know." So Frank went looking for Jeff Salmons, and he was down in the bar having a drink with the Sheffield reporter at the bar. So Coxie came in, Sammy was there, and he was reading the riot act to us about ripping his contracts up. And I've just signed a new player, which was John Turner from Torquay. What you know, how's it going to look with him and all the rest of it? And Sammy just said, "Hang on, Arthur." He used to call him Arthur. "Hang on, Arthur." He said, "You know these lads look after themselves. They train hard. They work hard. They'll give you 100% week in, week out." He says, "All they wanted were a little half a beer to make them sleep in the cot at night." And Coxie just walked out, and that was it. And I think we drew with Wimbledon that day, either 1-1 or 0-0. And you were talking about that season probably when I only probably missed one game. Sheffield Star used to do man of the match thing. And I think I came joint winner with Alan Little, or was it Alan Little and another Little? One played for Villa, one played for Barnsley at the time. And we were joined to Sheffield Star Players of the Years, you know what I mean? Because you used to get Star Player of the Week and all the rest of it when you played. So things like that are nice, you know. Because Alan Crawford always used to say to me, he got Star Player the season before, I think we signed him that season. And because I keep in touch with Alan Crawford. And one or two of the lads like Danny Wilson, play golf quite a bit with Danny, do a few charity events and everything. So, yeah, good days.
Yeah. What was it like when Frank Barlow kind of then took over? Because obviously you'll have played with him, haven't you?
Yeah. Well, you know, when you've been at one club and Frank was the man and boy, yeah. I mean, McGuigan signed him, and I think Frank had an injury and then went into coaching. And Frank was a great philosopher of the game, and I could talk to Frank for hours about football. You know, great bloke. And when he took over as manager, I think all the players wanted him to be manager, to be quite honest. I think because we got a good group of players, and we didn't want anything to change, really. I suppose you could look at Leeds United when Pluffy went to Leeds. You know, he changed things, and it doesn't work. You know, got to do it gradually. And I think we thought, you know, we wanted Frank to be manager because we all knew Frank, knew he was a good coach, knew he'd been with Coxie, and got massive respect for Frank. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I wouldn't have wanted anybody else to come in at that time other than Frank, really. But again, Frank was a nice guy as well. And he probably didn't have that ruthlessness in him to make those bigger decisions. I don't know, you know. I mean, decisions are decisions. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. So you can be ruthless and make a decision. It doesn't work, you know. It's, as Coxie found out, you know.
So it's interesting. You'll have played under... 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 6 or 7 different managers maybe at Chesterfield, something like that. So who did you think you kind of played, who got most out of you, I suppose, or who did you
I would say for me, for signing me, Jim McGuigan, you know, because he gave me the chance to have a career in football, and he just let me go out and play football. How I knew, which was great for me. And really, I would say Coxie from a coaching point of view and discipline, you know. And I suppose, you know, when you looked at Joe Shaw, like you said, I missed one game that season. I must have enjoyed playing under Joe, really. I think when you're playing well, it doesn't matter who's manager. It's when you're not playing well, you probably look at why am I not playing well, and do you fall out with the manager a bit? I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, when I look at some of the managers I played under, I mean, Billy Bremner, you know, he didn't shirk anything. I played at Peterborough under John Weil, who was a centre half, who was, ruthless and didn't take any prisoners and that sort of thing. So, and when you get people offering you, positions in football, like John Weil did at Peterborough, asked me to go back and be his assistant for a season, but it was too risky at that time. There's no money in football.
Yeah.
Neil Warnock, when he went to Scarborough, which was a couple of years before I finished playing, he wanted me to be his player coach, and he says, I'll take you right through football with me, because he said, this is my stepping stone to Football League management. He said, if you come to Scarborough with me, I'll take you right through it. But I found out later on, he said it's 3 other players. But, and then when Kevin Randall took over at Chesterfield, when I think John went to Ipswich. Did he go to Ipswich or he finished whatever? And Kevin rang me up and said, Andy, I don't know how you feel about coming back and being my assistant. I said, Kev, you know what? I'd love to, but it's too risky, because he said there's no money as such. He says, and I know you've got any financial services and you're probably doing okay. And he says, but so for that type of person to want you to be with them, again, speaks volumes for me,
So what was it like moving on from Chesterfield for a bit? Because you were there like, what, 12 seasons, maybe, something like that? It was a long time, and then you went to Doncaster.
Yeah, I mean, sort of 72 was when I signed pro at Chesterfield, and then it was 83 when the club had run out of money and basically they had to let players go. And it was strange moving to another club, but I moved with Ernie Moss, Bill Green, and a lad called John Breckin, who was left back at Rotherham, that I knew really well through Alan Crawford, because you just get to know players and go to different venues and matches and you see people. And so we were like, Bremner signed us just to look after the young lads that he got there, like Glyn and Ian Snodin and David Hall and Billy Russell and Colin Douglas up front, and and Dave Bentley was his assistant manager, coach, and I'd played with Dave at Chesterfield. Excuse me, I knew Dave really well. So the transition was easy because as soon as you get to another club, and to be quite honest, you're thought more of by the crowd as well, because you're new player, you can stay at one club too long, but keep changing managers and they see something in you. They don't let you go. You know what I mean? It's I always said to Danny, I got your move to Forest. I Birchie, I got your move to Wolves, and don't forget me and all the rest of it. You know what I mean? But because I had a great time with Alan Birch, because I knew him when he was at Walsall before he signed at Chesterfield. We'd had 1 or 2 battles already on the pitch, so when he signed at Chesterfield, we knew each other, and great character, lovely lad, you know what I mean? And some great lads that you meet, and some you remember. You may remember all of them, but keeping in touch with a lot of them, you don't always remember them, But Billy Bremner was a winner through and through. I really enjoyed it at Doncaster. It was really good. And because we got promotion that first season as well, the strange thing was going back to Saltergate and playing against Chesterfield, a night match, and I think we won 1-0, and Billy Bremner just said, they've signed Alan Birch. He says, you know him, just do a job on him. He said, that's all I'm saying, do what you want. He says, if he scores, it's down to you.
It's interesting because I spoke to Jamie Hewitt about because I think he went to Doncaster for a season as well. I think it was Doncaster he went to, and he was saying that it was quite invigorating for him, kind of just because you do become the fixture in the team. I suppose for fans, we always like a new signing, don't we? So I suppose it can be quite invigorating after a while, can't it? Just to get a change of scenery.
It is, yeah. Oh yeah, it's just like the new player there, or several of us, and when we had such a good start, you're great, aren't you? That's it. You've done it. and we got promotion. So, and I got invited back to Doncaster loads of times, because there was a guy that ended up owning the club, or the chairman, like called John Ryan. He was like in the executive group of people when I was there. And then when he took over, they moved ground and everything, like Chesterfield did, really. So, yeah, I was with two well-established clubs that both moved grounds similar times in a way. But, yeah, Chesterfield, I became a Spirite, you know what I mean? I went to the 1995, well, I went to loads of games in 1995, the FA Cup games. Went up to Manchester with my daughter to see them play Middlesbrough. Went to the replay, and I was at the end where the ball went over the line, and you're like a maniac supporter, you know what I mean? Calm down, sort of thing. But that was amazing,
Yeah, and like you,
and I went to Chelsea as well, last season, and got some lads that I play golf with, and the ironic thing, what a lovely story this is. Got these lads who I play golf with some tickets, and their sons through the club, obviously. There were 10 of us. And I said, I need all the names and everything, who's having tickets and address and telephone numbers and all the rest of it. And one lad who was going, his name was McGuigan. I thought, well, that's ironic, Jim McGuigan and all the rest of it. Anyway, we've gone off to London. I met up with them in London. And this young lad said to me, he says, Andy, he says, when did you play for Chesterfield? I says, signed in 1972, 73. He said, my granddad used to manage them.
Oh, wow.
I says, who? He says, Jim McGuigan. I says, you're joking. And I'm with his grandson, and he says, Andy, tell me about him. He says, because I was born after he died. I thought, well, it's sad in a way.
Yeah,
he says, I've heard stuff about him, but he says, you actually played for him and all the rest of it. So this lad were in awe of me, and I thought, what a lovely thing to happen on that day against Chelsea. Yeah. Ironic, isn't it, how things come round.
Isn't it just? Yeah, and
amazing, And I love Jim McGuigan to bits, but, I said he was always immaculately dressed. We played against Scunthorpe at home, and I think we're 2-1 down at half time. We won 3-2, and I knew I'd played well. And just give you a cup of tea at half time in those days, and you'd have it with proper tea leaves and dregs in your tea. And you used to be able to just lean through a door, and there were where you had a wee, trough. And I thought I'll just lean around and chuck my tea in the trough and get a fresh brew after, This was after the game. He'd said his bit, and I just turned around, chucked it round the corner, and he was stood there having a piss. And his tea dregs went all down his suit. I was absolutely mortified. And he just smiled, and he says, that might cost you a cleaning bill, sonny.
Steve Abley stretched the defence on the right wing. Fullback Charlie Henry was up in support. But it was a cracking first-time shot from Brian Hughes, which beat John Turner. Hughes only played as a late replacement for Gary Emanuel, who was unfit with an ankle injury. But the first corner of the match, only seconds before half-time, saw John Riddler, the Chesterfield club captain, head the equalising goal. 5 minutes into the second half, Dave Windridge laid on the winner. Alan Crawford is the man who makes the late run to put Chesterfield ahead 2-1. And despite mounting Swindon pressure, Turner made 3 outstanding saves, including 1 flying effort from Roy Greenwood.
So you did what? I think it was just under 300 league appearances, 292. Is that right? I think that's the figure I got.
Again, on stats, I don't know, but all somebody told me was I'm in the top 10 appearances for Chesterfield.
Yeah, I think you're on 9th in the top
About
10.
9.
Top 10 appearances. So what's that? It must be nice to have been able
Well,
to have played so many
it is
games.
nice. I mean, you know, to be in the top 10 appearances for a football club is an achievement in itself. You know, it shows loyalty to one club for one thing. And I was granted a testimonial that 82-83 season. You know, but there was I think it was Chesterfield Two Works. They were on like a 3-day week, and mining strikes were looming. And you used to go around to pubs and play darts, and they'd have a raffle, and you'd get the money and all the rest of it. I was embarrassed. And I just knocked it on the head. I couldn't do it, you know. And so I never had a testimonial game. I think it's me and Albert Owens that did more than 10 years and probably granted testimonials, but never had a testimonial match. Yeah. You know, and people say, you must have been daft, you know what I mean? But I says, I couldn't. And then I left. Well, you can't go back and say, can I have a testimonial, you know? And hey, you know, it didn't happen. So be it, you know what I mean? I couldn't, I've never been one to ask for anything, you know what I mean? Never, not only a lift back from Mansfield when my bus had gone, but you know, but yeah.
If you were to have a testimonial, who would you have it against?
To be honest, I thought about it years ago, you know, when like friends I've got, like Danny's a big friend of Kenny Dalglish, and we played against Liverpool in 1978 at Anfield when they had one of the greatest sides ever. And I would probably get, you know, have a word with people like Danny and say, right, you know, who can we get? And, you know, it's surprising he would come and play, because when we finished playing, we used to play for Queen's All-Stars, the charity team. And you got Mel Sterling playing. I mean, at the time, Emlyn Hughes. Emlyn was a lovely guy. He would have come and played, you know what I mean? If you said to Emlyn, I've got a testimony, we come play, he'd be there, first man. You know, so when you know players like that, Len Badger, you know, knew Len really well, and you get to know Tony Curry, and obviously played with Jeff Salmons and all these people. And there's a nucleus of people that you know, and, you know, they would be there for you, sort of thing, you know what I mean? So getting a team would not be an issue. And it'd be nice to, you know, get some of the old players back, even if it can only, I mean, I still play a bit of walking football these days, which is just for social, and still like having a game of football and nutmegging somebody, you know what I mean? I'm still like a kid when I play.
Yeah.
And I'm shouting and bawling at people in a nice sort of way, because I know they can't do certain things. And but that instinct of winning stays with you all your life. I mean, the funny thing is, my dad used to come to the games, and my younger brothers and stuff like that. And my mum came one day, you know, because it wasn't a scene at all, but she came. My dad said, you should go and see him play football. So I'm playing at Saltergate, and I'm mouthing and all the rest of it. And she turned to my dad and she says, is that our Andrew I can hear swearing? She always called me Andrew, you see. And he just smiled, you know. He said, yes, that's your son, you know. Because you just turned into somebody else on the pitch.
Yeah.
You know, it's just one of those things where you don't realise it yourself, but or maybe you do, but you know, you want to win, and that's what you're there for, and you want to do well and play well and team to play well, you know what I mean? It's yeah, fantastic feelings, really. I mean, I met it with a guy from Doncaster through my business, and this last 12 months, he says, I've got a photograph, Andy, when we beat Queen's Park Rangers in the FA Cup 1-0, you know. He said, it's a great photo. Have you got it? I says, I don't know. I probably have somewhere. He says, I'll get it here. And he sent me this photograph of us all in the bath, communal bath. And, you know, you look and you think, well, I know Dennis is about the same age as me, or a year older. You know, I sent messaged back to him. I said, "It's a great photo." I says, "We were the oldest buggers in that team, weren't we?" And he says, "Yeah." He says, "I thought that as well." Because there were young Glyn Snodin and Ian Snodin who went on to do well. They're all young lads, youngish.
I bet we could stick you all in a dressing room again today, and I bet within a few minutes it'd be just like you'd never left.
Well, and I don't want to bore you and all the rest of it, but the football thing, Kevin Randall, I wasn't bothered about going and scouting and doing all these match report things, but Kevin knew how I thought about stuff. He got a lot of time for me, Kevin, and he was with Neil Warnock, and you say, "Andy, we've got a player out on loan at Stockport or Chesterfield or Nottingham Forest or wherever it might be. We just go and have a look. Send us a match report how he did and what he's done. Or if they fancied a player, can you just go and watch that player and send him what you think?" And I used to have these conversations with Kevin on a Sunday or a Monday about these players, and he'd say, "Yeah, that's exactly what I thought." And and we had the same. You talk the same language to some of the players. And one of the nice things about going back and watching games now is who you might see when you go back. And sadly, John's not there anymore, and Kevin's not there anymore, and another guy, Mick Jones, died recently, who was at Peterborough and with Neil Warnock, and all these people and were managers. And Andy, I tried to sign you when I was at Peterborough, and all this. Coxey won't let you go, and all this, and he's ready to get more money for you, and all these stories. You know what I mean? But we all played the same game and love the game, and it's infectious. And partners, wives, and all the rest of it, and say, "Do you want to come to the game with me?" Well, I would, but you know what's going to happen? You're just going to be talking to them, aren't you, all the time? It's no good me being there. But and I still get excited about it now. But sadly, Kevin's not there. John's not. I went to John's funeral the other week, which was great because Pat Jennings was there, who I saw when I went to watch Mansfield play Watford, and he was in goals at Watford at that time. And I went up to Pat and said, "Look, you don't know me, but I went to watch you at Mansfield Town when you played for Watford." And he said, "Yeah, that'd be about 1962. I said, "Yeah, it would be, And what a lovely fella, And Ozzy Ardiles was, you probably know all these people that were there. And, you go and you're just talking to everybody after. Don't matter who they are, great stuff, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I'm fortunate enough that now I've had people. The furthest back I've been to was Bennett Steele, who was at Chesterfield in the 50s.
Yeah.
And I've obviously spoken to Bob Wilson, who was at Saltergate watching Gordon Banks in net, kind of his idol.
Yeah.
And then I've gone right through to kind of players that were at the club last season. And it's interesting. There's those big things in football that where the game has changed and everything. But it's obvious that the memories and the like the camaraderie between the players and those kind of things that make the game so great are all universal and have stayed there for as long as the game has been around.
Yeah. I know when Coxey was there particular, and we got us, the team picked itself week in, week out, more or less, unless there was injuries and all that sort of thing. And you knew if a player had got a problem off the pitch, you'd say, "So-and-so's not right today. And then, so we'd pull him and say, "What's wrong? What's wrong with you? What's wrong?" And they'd tell you. Men won't talk and all the rest of it. But we'd see it because we'd see a change in, it's like it's your own brother or your own sister, something's not right. And we'd see it and we'd get it out of them, That's how strong it can be, you know what I mean? It's, I'd finished, my contract was up at Peterborough, and John Wiles said, "Before you sign anywhere, if you go anywhere else, let me know what you're doing." I said, "Okay, I will." And then, ironically, out of the blue, because I still lived in Mansfield and travelled down to Peterborough, and John Wiles said to me, "I know you're a good pro." He said, "You don't need to come training every day." he says, come through match days and just one other day, play squash, do whatever you want to do, which was great for me. And they didn't have to pay me expenses for traveling. So that's what I did. So I got a phone call from Mike Waterson, who was chairman at the time at Chesterfield when John was there, when they got promotion and everything. And he said, Andy, spoke to John Duncan and he wants to sign you. Will you come in and have a chat with me? Well, I knew Mike really well because he used to get his tickets for the Embassy Snooker because he was a guy that started it off. Because that's where I first met Emily News, to be quite honest, in the VIP lounge. Anyway, I says, so I went to see Mike Waterson. I says, where's John? He says, John's in Canada with Kevin. They're doing some coaching in Canada. I says, well, I thought John might have rung me up. Or I said, no, he says, he'll let me sort everything out. So I said, okay then. So he said, when can you get in, sign? I says, well, he said, there's not a lot of money, as you know, blah, 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 but it suited me to go back to Chesterfield. So I rang John Weil at Peterborough and said, look, this is what's happened. He says, all I can offer you, Andy, is another year's contract, not much more money, and you'd have to move down here, really. I says, well, you sort me some accommodation out at Clubhouse or something, I'll come down. Money was tight, they couldn't do it. So I said, look, I'm going to go to Chesterfield. So I signed at Chesterfield. Not even spoken to John or Kevin. They just signed and turned up for training on training day. And John pulled me in his office. He says, "Did you want to come and sign?" Then I says, "Well, yeah." I says, "I want to come back." I says, "Thought you wanted me. I know Kevin, as you know, and all that." He says, "Yeah, Kevin says you're a good lad and all that." He said it was Mike who wanted you back, I says, well, if you don't want me, you shouldn't have let me come back. Like, you know what I mean? You should have said, Mark, I don't want him. You know what I mean? He said, no. He says, and then he says, no, I want you back. He said, I spoke to Kevin about you. He says, what a good lad you are, and all the rest of it. And we had a chat for about an hour about family, all about family and my family and his family, and just talked. I thought, what a great guy. Gave me a great feeling from, because I didn't know him. But once I'd been in with him for an hour, I felt like I really knew him.
Yeah.
And I'd only gone back on cover, you know what I mean? So it suited me. And then I went into financial services halfway through that season. And I said to John, look, I've got an opportunity to go into financial services. And he says, look, do it. He says, as long as you don't interfere with match days and training, I ain't got a problem. So that's what I did. And it was one of the stories. We were playing Mansfield on New Year's Day. It must have been 86, 87 season. I think it was a New Year's Day match. And I wasn't in the squad. So end of my career and New Year's Eve, do I go out? Yeah, I'll be all right. I'll go out. Because I wasn't in the squad. So gone out till whatever time, I think it was 12 o'clock kick off at Field Mill. And about 8:30, phone. So this is early. Sunday, New Year's Day, 8:30 in the morning. Kevin Randall. Where have you been? Where have you been? I said, what, Kev? He says, we out last night. I says, what do you think, Kev? He says, oh, fucking hell. He says, you got your sub today. So-and-so's gone downhill and this, that, and the other. So he says, whatever you do, he says, don't stink a beer and don't tell John Duncan you went out last night. I says, yeah, and Pope's a Catholic, It was one of those stories, you know what I mean? I did go on for half an hour. And I think it was a 1-1 draw. I can't remember exactly, but that would just. I said, I wasn't even in squad, Kev. You know what I mean? He says, oh, yeah. And so we always used to have a laugh about that. They're just stories that crop up. It's like when you start telling jokes, you go, oh, that one.
Yeah.
And they start coming all back to you, and But good times, great times.
Legends of
when Danny Wilson was manager at Barnsley and Sheffield Wednesday, because we were such good friends and we talked about the game a lot. You know, you don't realise how much you're talking about the game to these different people. I used to get tickets at Barnsley and Sheffield Wednesday, and then he'd say, "Come down to the dressing room come down to my office after the game and come in," and all the rest of it. And I might have to go and do press and all the rest of it. So there'd be 1 or 2 people in there, and you get to know people and all the rest of it. When he was at Barnsley, they played Arsenal. Arsene Wenger was manager. So after the game, I think Arsenal won about 3-1 or whatever, and Pat Rice came into the dressing room, into the manager's office. There was me, Eric Winstanley, Danny, Frank Bollo, and Pat Rice come in. And they used to bring food in after the game into the office, a few chips and a bit of pie and pork pie and sausage, you know. Pat Rice came in, he says, "Hang on, lads, don't talk to me yet. Let me just have some of this food." What, are you hungry? Wenger, he says, got him all on diets, pills for this, they can have that diet, they can have that diet. He says, got me on it as well. He says, I can't have nothing. He says, I'm having some of this food here, some of this pie and chips before I start talking to you.